My father did not call me a disgrace when I told him I was pregnant at 27. He called me a liability. That single word defined the next 7 years of my life. He threw me out to protect his bottom line, but he forgot that liabilities can be purchased if the price is right. Today, I signed the papers to acquire his distressed debt, and for the first time in my life, I am the one holding the leverage. The silence in my father's house was not peaceful. It was the heavy, pressurized silence of a bank vault, where the air itself seemed to be counted and catalogued. At 27 years old, I was still living in the bedroom where I had spent my teenage years, a fact that sat in my stomach like a cold stone. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I was being responsible, saving money from my job at Northline Claim Services so that when I finally left, I would leave with a cushion large enough to ensure I never had to come back. But the truth was simpler and more pathetic. I was staying because I was still waiting for Randall Wood to look at me and see something other than a disappointing investment. My father was a man of structures. He owned Woodridge Structural, a construction firm that built half the strip malls and office parks in Briar Glen, Ohio. To him, life was a series of load-bearing walls and stress tests. If you were not supporting the roof, you were dead weight. And in the spring of that year, I was about to become the heaviest weight of all. I knew I was pregnant before I took the test. I knew it in the exhaustion that seeped into my marrow, making the fluorescent lights at Northline feel like physical blows. I knew it in the way the smell of my mother's morning coffee, usually my favorite scent, suddenly made my throat seize with nausea. When the second pink line appeared on the plastic stick in the staff bathroom at work, I did not cry. I sat on the closed lid of the toilet and stared at the stall door, calculating. I had $3,000 in my savings account, I had a car that needed new transmission fluid, and I had Evan Mercer. Evan was the kind of mistake you make when you are desperate to feel seen. He was charming in a shallow, reflective way, like sunlight on a puddle. He worked in sales for a landscaping supply company, and he had a way of making the future sound like a guaranteed win. I met him at a park bench near the river that evening to tell him the wind was picking up, rattling the dry leaves of last year's oak trees. "I am pregnant," I said. The silence that followed was different from the silence in my father's house. This was the silence of a vacuum, of all the air leaving the room. Evan looked at the river. He looked at his shoes. He looked everywhere except at my face. "Kennedy," he said, his voice tight. "We talked about this. We are just having fun. This is not part of the plan. It is not a plan," I said. "It is a reality." He stood up, wiping his hands on his jeans as if he had touched something dirty. "I cannot do this right now. My numbers are down this quarter. I am thinking about moving to Columbus. I just cannot take this on." He was backing away as he spoke, his feet literally carrying him out of my life while his mouth made vague, empty promises. "I will call you," he said. "We will figure something out. But not right now. I need space." He disappeared into the gray dusk of Briar Glen, and I never saw him again. I sat on that bench until my hands were numb, realizing that the charm was gone, and underneath it was nothing but a hollow panic. I was alone. The terror should have paralyzed me. Instead, it clarified things. I drove home, the tires of my sedan humming against the asphalt. I walked into the house where nothing was ever out of place, where the throw pillows were karate chopped in the center and the mail was stacked by size. Sunday dinner was mandatory. It was a ritual my father insisted on, a performance of family unity that felt more like a board meeting. My mother, Marla, spent all afternoon cooking roast beef and potatoes, the smell of rosemary heavy in the air. We sat at the mahogany table, the china clinking softly. Randall sat at the head. He was a broad man, his hair silver and precise, his face set in a permanent expression of critical appraisal. Marla sat to his right, her smile anxious, her eyes darting between us like a referee waiting for a foul. "So," Randall said, cutting his meat with surgical precision, "I saw the quarterly reports for the county. Permits are down 12%. It is the interest rates." Marla said softly. Everyone says so. It is lack of vision, Randall corrected. He did not look at her. He looked at his fork. Kennedy, pass the salt. I handed him the shaker. My hand was trembling. I put it down on the table, and the glass made a sharp click against the wood. Dad, I said. Mom, I have to tell you something. Randall stopped chewing. He looked at me then, really looked at me, with that narrowing of the eyes that usually preceded a lecture on fiscal responsibility or posture. Is it about the car? He asked. Because I told you, if that transmission goes, it is on your dime. It is not the car. I said. I took a breath. The air in the room felt thin. I am pregnant. The clock in the hallway ticked. 1, 2, 3. Marla dropped her fork. It clattered against the plate. A shocking noise in the stillness. Her hand flew to her mouth, covering a gasp that never quite made it out. Randall did not move. He did not blink. He placed his knife and fork down on the edge of his plate, perfectly parallel to each other. He took a sip of water, then he leaned back in his chair. The leather creaking. Who is the father? He asked. His voice was devoid of emotion. It was the voice he used when a subcontractor quoted him a price he did not like. It does not matter, I said, keeping my voice steady. He is not in the picture. I am going to raise the baby on my own. Marla made a small, whimpering sound. Oh, Kennedy, no. What will people say? The club, the garden committee? Randall raised a hand to silence her. He stared at me, his eyes cold and hard as flint. You are going to raise it? He repeated. Here? In this house? I hope so. I said, just for a little while. Until I can save enough for a deposit on an apartment. I have the job at Northline. I can make it work. Randall laughed. It was a dry, humorless bark. Make it work, he mocked. You have barely made your own life work. Kennedy, you are 27 years old, answering phones for an insurance company, living in your childhood bedroom, and now you want to bring a bastard child into this house? Randall, please, Marla whispered. He ignored her. He stood up, towering over the table. Do you have any idea what kind of year I'm having? He asked. Do you know how fragile the market is right now? Woodridge Structural relies on reputation. It relies on clean optics. I have contracts pending with the city council. I have investors looking at our stability. I gripped the edge of the table. This is my life, Dad. Not a contract. It is all a contract, he shouted, slamming his hand on the table. The silverware jumped. Everything is a contract. You are my daughter. You carry my name. And right now, you are a liability. The word hung in the air, vibrating. Liability, not a mistake, not a disappointment, a liability, something that costs more than it is worth, something to be cut. Marla reached across the table, her fingers fluttering near my hand but not touching it. Kennedy, sweetheart, maybe you could go away for a while? Aunt Sarah in Vermont? Or there are places, doctors. I pulled my hand back. Mom, I am keeping the baby. Then you are not keeping this roof, Randall said. He walked to the sideboard and poured himself a scotch. He did not offer one to anyone else. I want you out, he said, his back to me. 48 hours. Randall, you cannot be serious, Marla said. But her voice was weak. It lacked the iron needed to stop him. I am deadly serious, he said, turning around. He took a sip of the amber liquid. She is an adult. She made a choice. Now she can live with the overhead. I will not have a pregnant, unwed daughter parading around Briar Glen, ruining the image I have spent 40 years building. He looked at me with a detached curiosity, as if I were a building with a cracked foundation that needed to be demolished. 48 hours. Kennedy, and before you go, I will have my lawyer draft a document. You will sign it. It will state that you will make no claim on family assets for the support of this child, and you will not use the Woodridge name in any capacity regarding your situation. You will keep this mess off my books. I stood up. My legs felt like water, but I forced them to hold me. I am your daughter. I said, "Not an employee. You cannot fire me. I just did." He said, I looked at my mother. She was weeping silently into her napkin, her shoulders shaking. She did not look up. She did not say, "No, Randall." She stays. She did not say, "We will help her." She just cried, trying to manage the situation by dissolving into it. I walked out of the dining room. I walked up the stairs. I went into my room and closed the door. And then I slid down against the wood and buried my face in my knees. I did not sleep that night. I spent the next day in a fog, going to work, typing claims forms, my fingers moving automatically while my brain tried to process the eviction. I did not tell anyone at Northline. I was too ashamed. That evening, the house was quiet. Randall and Marla were in the den. I was in my room, packing my life into 3 cardboard boxes and a duffel bag. I had called Tessa Lang, an old friend who had moved to Maine 2 years ago. Tessa was rough around the edges, loud, and fiercely loyal. When I told her what happened, she did not ask about the father or the optics. She just said, "Get on a bus. I have a couch. It smells like dog, but it is dry." I was taping the last box shut when I realized I needed water. I opened my bedroom door and crept into the hallway. The door to the den was slightly ajar. I heard my father's voice. He was on the phone. "I understand the risk profile," he was saying. His voice was low, urgent. I heard the rustle of papers. "But if we trigger the credit line covenant now, the whole house of cards shakes." I paused. I knew enough about business from listening to him over the years to know that a covenant was a promise made to a lender. A rule you could not break. "No," he said. "The personal guarantee covers the gap. I handled the optics. The girl is leaving. There will be no social fallout to spook the board." I froze. "The girl. He was talking about me." "Yes," he continued. "I secured the secondary leverage. The signature is on file. We are compliant. Just keep the bank happy for another quarter." My heart hammered against my ribs. He was not just talking about reputation. He was talking about money. He was talking about me leaving as a condition for something financial. Risk profile, covenant, leverage. I backed away slowly, the water forgotten. I went back into my room and locked the door. I did not understand the details. I was a medical claims processor, not a forensic accountant, but I understood the tone. My pregnancy was not just a social embarrassment. It was a variable in an equation I could not see. I did not wait for the 48 hours to run out. I did not sign his document. I left a note on the kitchen counter that simply said, "I am gone," and I called a taxi to take me to the Greyhound station at 4 a.m. The bus ride to Maine was an exercise in misery. It took 22 hours. The seats were narrow. The air smelled of stale sanitizer and diesel, and my morning sickness did not care about the schedule. I spent half the trip in the cramped bathroom, dry heaving until my ribs ached, but as we crossed the state line into Maine, the air changed. It became sharper, colder. I saw the ocean for the first time in years, gray and churning under a steel sky. It looked inhospitable, but it also looked honest. The ocean did not care about optics. Tessa met me at the station in Harbor Point. She looked different than I remembered. Her hair was dyed a bright, defiant red, and she wore a heavy parka that looked like it had survived a war. She hugged me so hard I thought she might crush the baby. "You look like hell." "Ken," she said, grinning. "I feel like hell." I admitted. "Good," she said. "That means you are still alive. Let's go get you fed." Harbor Point was a working town. It was not pretty in the way Briar Glen was pretty. There were no manicured lawns or country clubs. There were fishing trawlers, processing plants, and small weathered houses that huddled together against the wind. Tessa's apartment was above a bakery. It smelled of yeast and salt. The couch did, in fact, smell like her golden retriever, Buster. But when I lay down on it that first night, covered in a mismatched quilt, I slept for 12 hours straight. The first few months were a blur of survival. Tessa helped me get a job at Seabrook Medical Billing. It was a small office near the docks, run by a woman named Mrs. Higgins, who smoked menthols and typed with 2 fingers. The pay was low, but it was steady. I found a studio apartment 3 blocks away. It was the size of a closet, with a radiator that clanked like a dying engine and a view of a brick wall. But it was mine. I developed a routine. I had to. Chaos was the enemy. I woke up at 6. I ate oatmeal because it was cheap and stayed down. I walked to work. I processed claims for 8 hours, learning the intricate, frustrating language of insurance codes, ICD-10, CPT, modifiers, denials. I learned that a single wrong digit could ruin a patient's credit, and that the system was designed to say no, at night. I sat at my small Formica table and wrote letters. Dear Peanut, I wrote, I did not have a name for him yet. Today I bought a crib from a second-hand store. It has a scratch on the leg, but I sanded it down. It is sturdy. You will be safe here. You will never have to wonder if you are wanted. You are the only thing I want. I wrote to keep the anger at bay. The anger was a living thing, coiling in my chest. I was furious at Evan for his cowardice. I was furious at Marla for her silence. But mostly, I was furious at Randall. Every time I paid my rent, I thought of him. Every time I walked past a construction site, I thought of him. I thought about the word liability. I let it harden me. I let it turn my grief into a spine of steel. I would not be a liability. I would be an asset. I would be solvent. I would be undeniable. My belly grew. I felt the first flutters of movement, like a goldfish swimming in my stomach. I went to my prenatal appointments at the community clinic. I took my vitamins. I counted every penny, tracking my expenses in a spiral notebook with the same rigor my father applied to his corporate accounts. 6 months after I arrived in Harbor Point, a letter arrived. It was not a personal letter. It was a rigid, business-sized envelope with a certified mail sticker on it. The return address was Crownstead Community Bank in Briar Glen, Ohio. My stomach dropped. I had closed my account at Crownstead the day I left. I had no business with them. I sat on the edge of my bed and tore open the envelope. Inside was a formal demand letter. Dear Ms. Wood, regarding loan account 8842-B, commercial guarantee. We are writing to request updated income verification for the personal guarantee secured by your signature on the date of April 14th. As the co-signatory for the revolving credit facility extended to Woodridge Structural. Your current employment status is required to maintain covenant compliance. I stared at the paper. The words swam before my eyes. April 14th. That was the week I told my parents I was pregnant. That was the week before Randall kicked me out. Personal guarantee. I read the paragraph again, and again, co-signatory. I had never signed a loan for Woodridge Structural. I had never signed a commercial guarantee. I had never even seen the paperwork for my father's business lines of credit. But the letter was clear. According to Crownstead Community Bank, I was a guarantor. My name was on the debt. My credit was tied to his company. I remembered the conversation in the hallway. The personal guarantee covers the gap. The signature is on file. I felt a cold chill that had nothing to do with the Maine winter. My father had not just kicked me out. He had used me. He had needed a signature to secure his loan, perhaps another asset to leverage, or a second guarantor to lower the bank's risk profile. And he had provided one. My signature. He had forged my name, or tricked me into signing something amidst the flurry of insurance forms or car title papers I had handled over the years. And then, once the loan was secure, once the covenant was met, he had discarded me. I looked at the letter in my trembling hands. I looked at the date. I looked at the formal demand for my financial information. He thought I was gone. He thought I was a scared, pregnant girl who would disappear into poverty and never ask questions. He thought I was a liability. He had written off. I placed my hand on my stomach, feeling the baby kick, a strong, rhythmic thump against my palm. I am not a liability, I whispered to the empty room. I folded the letter and placed it in my file box, right next to my birth certificate. I am a creditor, and one day, I am going to collect. The ocean air in Harbor Point was different in November. It was sharper. biting at the exposed skin of my neck as I walked the 4 blocks from the bus stop to the daycare center. But I did not mind the cold. The cold was honest. It woke you up. It reminded you that you were alive, and more importantly, that you were standing on your own 2 feet. My son, Noah, was born on a Tuesday morning in a delivery room that smelled of antiseptic and rain. When the nurse placed him on my chest, he did not cry immediately. He looked up at me with eyes that were dark and serious, eyes that seemed to know we were starting this life with a deficit. I held his small, slippery body against mine and made a promise that I did not speak aloud. I will be your wall. I thought, the world can be chaotic. The world can be cruel. Men can leave, and fathers can lie, and houses can be taken away. But you will never know that fear. You will know dinner at 6 o'clock. You will know clean sheets. You will know that when I say I will be there, that promise became the architecture of my life. For the first few years, our world was small. It was the studio apartment, which I kept meticulously clean, scrubbing the linoleum floors until they shone. It was the daycare center where Noah learned to stack blocks with a concentration that mirrored my own. And it was Seabrook Medical Billing. I had expected the job to be boring. I had expected to hate the endless rows of data, the insurance codes, the rejection letters. But I found something else in the numbers. I found a language. Medical billing was not just data entry. It was a negotiation. It was a complex system of rules and exceptions, a game played between providers who wanted to be paid and insurers who wanted to keep their money. I learned that a denial was rarely a final no. It was usually a technicality, a missing modifier, a transposed digit, a failure to prove medical necessity according to a specific paragraph in a policy manual. I became obsessed with the details. While the other billers in the office sighed and archived the rejected claims, I dug into them. I read the master service agreements. I memorized the ICD-10 coding manuals until I could recite the code for a fractured clavicle or a routine physical without looking. You are like a dog with a bone. Kennedy, Mrs. Higgins told me one afternoon. She was leaning over my shoulder, smelling of menthol cigarettes and hairspray. Most people just write that off as bad debt. It is not bad debt, I said, tapping my screen. It is lazy paperwork. This patient has coverage. The carrier is just banking on us being too tired to fight the appeal. Mrs. Higgins chuckled. Well, if you get the money, you get a bonus. I got the money. I recovered $12,000 in aged receivables that month alone. My supervisor, a stern woman named Joyce, who usually communicated in grunts, called me into her office a week later. You have an aptitude for this, she said. You see the patterns. I just read the rules. I said, most people do not. She replied, you should get certified. The Atlantic Shore Career Institute runs a night program for medical reimbursement specialists. The company will pay for half if you pass. I took the course. I spent my evenings after Noah went to sleep, sitting at the small kitchen table, highlighting textbooks on compliance, revenue cycle management, and the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. I learned about the legal frameworks that govern debt. I learned that debt was not a moral failing, as my father had always implied. It was a contract. It was an asset that could be traded, sold, and enforced. When I passed the certification exam with a perfect score, I felt a shift inside me. It was the first time in my life I had a credential that was entirely my own. It was not given to me by my father's influence. It was earned in the quiet hours of the night, fueled by instant coffee and the terrifying need to provide for my son. By the time Noah was 3, he was a happy, grounded child who loved trucks and ocean documentaries. He had no idea that his mother checked her bank balance 3 times a day. He had no idea that I sometimes woke up in a cold sweat, dreaming of a letter telling me to vacate the premises, to him. I was just Mom. I was the one who made pancakes on Saturdays and read Goodnight Moon until the pages were soft. But at work, I was becoming something else. I started taking on side work, small clinics in town, a chiropractor, a dentist, a physical therapist. Heard about the woman at Seabrook who could clean up messy ledgers. I would go in on weekends, sift through their boxes of unpaid invoices, and find the money they had given up on. That was how I met Dorian Pike. I was working on a Saturday morning at a podiatrist's office in Port Landis, trying to make sense of a filing system that seemed to be based on wishful thinking. When a man walked in, he was in his 50s, wearing a wool coat that looked expensive but worn, and he carried a leather satchel. He had the intense, bird-like energy of a man who noticed everything. "Doctor, Evan said you found the error in the Medicare bundle," he said without preamble. I looked up from the file. "I am sorry." "Who are you?" "Dorian Pike," he said, extending a hand. "Pike Ledger Solutions. I buy the debt." "Doctor, Evans cannot collect, or I used to, until you started collecting it for him." I shook his hand. It was dry and firm. "I am just doing my job." "Mr. Pike, call me Dorian, and you are doing more than a job. You are doing forensic accounting for $20 an hour." "25. I corrected. He laughed. It was a sharp, sudden sound. "You are undercharging." "Look, I run a small firm. We buy distressed receivables, not the big corporate packages. I am talking about the small stuff. The stuff the big agencies ignore because the documentation is messy. I fix the documentation, and then I collect, legally, cleanly." He paused, looking at the stack of files on the desk. "I need someone who understands that the paper tells the story. Someone who does not get emotional about the money, but gets obsessive about the accuracy." "I am not looking for a new job." I said, "I have a son. I need stability. I am not offering a job." He said, "I am offering an education. Keep your day job, but come work with me on the side. I will teach you how to value a portfolio. I will teach you how to buy a debt for 5 cents on the dollar and turn it into 50. I looked at him. I saw the intelligence in his eyes, but I also saw a certain weariness. He was a man who knew how the world worked, and he was not trying to sell me a dream. He was offering me a tool. I went to his office the next Tuesday evening. It was a small, cluttered space above a hardware store, filled with filing cabinets and the hum of a server rack. Dorian was a strict teacher. He did not tolerate guessing. "Rule number 1, he said, pacing the room while I reviewed a chain of title on a defaulted dental loan. "We do not harass. We do not threaten. We are not breakers of legs. We are enforcers of contracts. If you have to raise your voice, you have already lost." I learned the difference between a judgment and a lien. I learned how to search the Uniform Commercial Code filings to see who else had a claim on a debtor's assets. I learned that most people ignored debt because they were ashamed, and that shame was a fog that obscured their rights. My job, Dorian taught me, was to clear the fog. We verify everything. He said, "If the original note is missing, we do not buy it. If the signature looks off, we walk away. We are the white hats in a dirty industry." Kennedy. "We make money because we are right, not because we are loud." One evening, while evaluating a batch of unpaid veterinary bills, I came across a familiar name, not in the file, but in my mind, Evan Mercer. I had not spoken his name in 4 years. I had not looked for him, but sitting there, surrounded by the wreckage of other people's financial lives, I felt a sudden, sharp curiosity. I opened a browser tab. I typed his name. He was easy to find. He had a LinkedIn profile. He was living in Columbus. Just as he had threatened, he was working as a regional sales director for a medical supply company. He looked older, a little heavier, but he had the same easy smile. I looked at the photos. There was one of him on a boat, one of him at a conference, holding a drink. He looked happy. He looked unburdened. I thought about the child support he owed. I knew, with my new skills, exactly how to get it. I could file a petition. I could garnish his wages. I could make his life very complicated, very quickly. I sat there, my finger hovering over the mouse. I thought about the $3,000 in my emergency fund. I thought about the winter coat I needed to buy for Noah. Then I thought about the silence in our apartment, the peace. If I opened this door, I would be inviting Evan in, not just his money, But his chaos, his excuses, his panic, he would want to see Noah, or he would fight to avoid seeing him. He would bring lawyers. He would bring drama. Noah was happy. He did not know he was missing anything. I closed the browser tab. I will not sell my piece for a monthly check, I whispered. I went back to the veterinary bills. I found a missing signature on a $300 invoice and flagged it as uncollectible. I chose stability. I chose to be the sole author of my son's life. But while I was ignoring my past, it was not ignoring me. I kept in touch with Tessa, my friend who had first taken me in. She still lived in Harbor Point, but her sister still lived in Briar Glen, and Tessa was a conduit for gossip that I pretended not to want. "Your dad is in the paper again," Tessa told me over coffee one Sunday while Noah played on the slide at the park. I stirred my latte. "I do not care." "Tessa, he cut the ribbon on a new library wing," she said. "Woodridge Structural donated the labor. It looks real nice." "Ken, the article called him a pillar of the community." I snorted. "A pillar made of hollow drywall." "Yeah, well," Tessa said, lowering her voice, "that is the public stuff. My sister says the guys who poured the foundation for that library are still waiting for their checks." "What?" I asked, looking up. "She says payments are late, then later. Then they come with excuses about bank transfers and routing numbers. The small guys are getting squeezed." I frowned. That did not sound like Randall. Randall was ruthless, but he was organized. He prided himself on liquidity. If he was stiffing the little guys, it meant he did not have the cash. "It is probably just a cash flow bump," I said. "He is over-leveraged. He always is." "Maybe," Tessa said, "but it is weird. He is driving a new Mercedes, and your mom is posting pictures of them vacationing in Aspen. But the plumber who fixed their guest bath put a lien on the house last month." A lien. The word triggered something in my brain. A lien was public record. A lien meant the polite letters had stopped and the legal machinery had started. I went home that night and felt a strange unease. I told myself it did not matter. I was 700 miles away. I had a new life. I had Noah. Then the email came. It arrived in my personal inbox on a Tuesday night. The subject line was blank. The sender was an address I did not recognize. Blue Gardenia 55. I almost deleted it as spam, but something made me click. "Kennedy, I know you will not reply to this. I do not blame you. I just wanted you to know that I saw a picture of you on Tessa's Facebook page. The little boy looks like you. He has your chin. Your father is angry. He does not talk about you, but he is angry. He thought you would come back after a few months. He thought you would fail. He says you are doing this out of spite. He thinks you are waiting to embarrass him. Please be careful. He checks your name online. He watches. I miss you. Mom." I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. "He thinks you are waiting to embarrass him." It was so perfectly Randall. He could not conceive of a world where I was simply living my life. In his mind, everything I did was a reaction to him. My survival was an insult. My independence was an attack. He was watching me. I felt a flash of the old fear, the feeling of being small and powerless in his kitchen. But then I looked around my apartment. I looked at the textbooks on my desk. I looked at the certification framed on my wall. I was not that girl anymore. I replied to the email. I typed 2 sentences. "I am not waiting for anything. I am just living." I hit send. Then, because the email had unsettled me, and because I was now a woman who verified everything, I did something I should have done years ago. I logged into a credit monitoring service. I had avoided looking at my credit report for a long time. I lived on a cash basis. I had a debit card and a secure savings account. I did not have credit cards. I did not have loans. I lived within the small, safe perimeter of what I actually owned. But Dorian had taught me that your credit report is your biography. It tells the story of who you are to the system. I paid the $20 fee and downloaded the full report from all 3 bureaus. I scrolled through the pages. It was mostly empty. No mortgages, no car loans, a few old utility inquiries from when I first moved to Maine. Then I saw it. It was in the section marked Inquiries, older than 2 years. Crownstead Community Bank. The date was April 14th, 7 years ago. I stopped breathing. April 14th. That was 3 days before I told my parents I was pregnant. That was 5 days before Randall kicked me out. I looked at the details. It was a hard inquiry. A hard inquiry only happens when you apply for credit. When you sign a document authorizing a lender to check your history. I had not applied for credit on April 14th. I had been at work at Northline Claims. I had been vomiting in the bathroom and worrying about how to tell Evan. But someone had applied in my name. I remembered the letter from the bank that I had received when I first arrived in Maine. The one demanding updated income verification for a personal guarantee. I had pushed it away back then. I had been too overwhelmed with the baby and the move. I had assumed it was a mistake or a clerical error. But a hard inquiry on my credit report was not a clerical error. It was a digital footprint. My father had used my social security number. He had used my name. He had made me a guarantor on his debt before he even knew I was pregnant. And then, when I became a liability to his reputation, he had kicked me out, but he had kept the signature. I sat there in the blue light of the monitor, and the pieces finally clicked together. The conversation I had overheard about the covenant, the risk profile. He needed a clean guarantor. Maybe his own credit was tapped out. Maybe he needed a family member to sign to satisfy some bank requirement about skin in the game. So he used me. He forged my signature, or slipped a page in front of me, and he locked me into his debt. And then he exiled me so I would never find out. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that was colder than the Maine wind. It was not sadness. It was the absolute zero of realization. My father did not just reject me. He stole from me. He stole my name. He stole my financial identity. He turned me into a prop for his balance sheet. I looked at the date again, April 14th. I printed the page. The printer whirred and clicked in the quiet apartment. I picked up the warm piece of paper. I folded it perfectly in half. I walked into the bedroom where Noah was sleeping. He was sprawled out on his back, one arm thrown over his head, breathing the deep, trusting breath of the safe. I watched him for a long time. Randall Wood thought I was a liability. He thought I was a messy, emotional girl who could be discarded to keep his optics clean. He had no idea what I had become. I went back to the living room and picked up my phone. I dialed Dorian's number. Even though it was late, he answered on the second ring. "Pike, Dorian," I said. My voice was steady. It was the voice of a woman who knew the codes. "Kennedy, is everything okay?" "I need you to teach me something else," I said. "What?" "You taught me how to buy medical debt. You taught me how to clean up ledgers for dentists and vets." "Yes, I need you to teach me how to buy commercial paper." I said, "I need to know how to buy a distressed business loan." There was a pause on the line. I could hear the hum of Dorian's server in the background. That is a different beast. "Kennedy," he said slowly, "that is big league. High risk. Why do you want to know?" "Because," I said, staring at the credit report on my desk, "I think there is an asset coming to market soon, and I want to be the one to buy it." Dorian did not ask for details. He was a man who respected the privacy of a motive. "Okay," he said. "Come in tomorrow. We will start with the Uniform Commercial Code and the structure of shell companies." "Thank you," I said. I hung up. I did not go to sleep. I sat by the window and watched the streetlights of Harbor Point. I was 31 years old. I was a mother. I was a professional. And for the first time in 7 years, I was not running away from Briar Glen. I was turning around. I was not going back for revenge. Revenge was messy. Revenge was emotional. I was going back for an audit. 7 years is a long time in the life of a debt, but it is a blink of an eye in the life of a grudge. At 34, I was no longer the girl who had vomited in a Greyhound station bathroom. I was the owner and sole operator of Harborline Portfolio Partners, a limited liability company registered in Delaware, but operating out of a converted loft in Portland, Maine. The name was a fiction, a corporate shell designed to sound established and coastal, but the business was real. I bought paper. Specifically, I bought distressed consumer receivables, unpaid dental bills, defaulted veterinary loans, gym memberships that had gone to collections. I bought them in bundles, usually for pennies on the dollar, and then I used calm, compliant, legally airtight methods to collect them. I did not scream, I did not harass, I did not call people at dinner time. I simply located the assets, verified the chain of title, and sent letters that were polite, firm, and backed by the absolute certainty of the law. I had learned that people do not pay debts because they are threatened. They pay because they are cornered by the truth. My office was quiet. It was a space of white walls, dual monitors, and the hum of a shredder. It was a sanctuary of order. I had built a life that was impregnable. My son, Noah, was 7 now, a bright, sensitive boy who loved Legos and the ocean. We had a townhouse with a mortgage I paid 2 weeks early every month. We had a golden retriever named Salty. We had peace, but peace, I was learning, is often just the intermission between wars. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the phone rang. It was my personal cell, a number only a few people had. I saw the area code, Briar Glen, Ohio, and my hand froze over the mouse. It was Tessa. I let it ring twice before answering. I had not been back to Briar Glen since the day I left, and every time the town reached out to touch me, I felt a phantom ache, like a bone that had broken and healed wrong. "Hey, Tess," I said, keeping my voice even. "Kennedy, you need to hear this." Tessa said. She was breathless, the way she got when she had a piece of gossip too big to carry alone. "I am working," I said. "Work can wait. It is your dad. It is Woodridge Structural." I stared at the spreadsheet on my screen. Column A was the debtor's name. Column B was the principal amount. Column C was the date of last payment. "What about him?" I asked. "He's going under." "Ken, like, really under. My sister works at the county clerk's office, and she says the filings are piling up. Liens, lawsuits. And get this, the bank is moving to foreclose on the old mill property." My fingers tightened around the phone. The old mill was a commercial complex on the edge of town. A brick-and-mortar trophy my father had bought 10 years ago. It was his pride. He used to drive me past it when I was a teenager, pointing at the crumbling chimney. "That is your inheritance, Kennedy," he would say. "If you behave, if you marry right, that is your annuity." It was the carrot he had dangled to keep me in line, the promise of future security in exchange for present obedience. "Foreclosing?" I asked. "The old mill has tenants. It should be cash positive." "Not anymore," Tessa said. "Half the tenants left, and apparently, he took out a second and third mortgage on it to float the construction company. The rumor is he is overextended on that big municipal project in Dayton. He is robbing Peter to pay Paul, and Paul just called the sheriff." I felt a strange, cold sensation in my chest. It was not joy. It was not pity. It was the feeling of a hypothesis being confirmed. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because you are his daughter," Tessa said softly, "and because I know you. You pretend you do not care, but you check the weather in Ohio every morning. I thought you should know. The vultures are circling. I am not a vulture. Tessa, I know," she said. "You are the one who flew away. But sometimes, birds fly back." We hung up a few minutes later. I tried to go back to my spreadsheet. I tried to focus on a $300 claim from an orthodontist in New Hampshire, but the numbers blurred. Woodridge Structural is collapsing. I stood up and walked to the window. Below me, the streets of Portland were gray and wet with rain. I had spent 7 years building a wall between me and my father. I had refused to ask for child support. I had refused to let him know where I lived. I had erased myself from his world so that he could never again call me a liability. But he was still in my world. He was the ghost in the machine. He was the hard inquiry on my credit report that I had never resolved. I went back to my desk. I did not open my work files. Instead, I opened a new browser window. I logged into the portal for the Ohio Secretary of State. I typed in Woodridge Structural. The screen populated with filings. It was a disaster. There were 6 active lawsuits for breach of contract. There were tax liens from the state, and there were UCC filings, Uniform Commercial Code financing statements, that showed a desperate man leveraging every asset he had. I clicked on the most recent filings. Usually, you would see a bank listed as the secured party, Crownstead Community Bank, or maybe a large national lender. But the secured party on the newest loans was not a bank, Praxis Lending Cooperative. I frowned. I knew the players in the debt world. I knew the big banks, the private equity firms, the hard money lenders. I had never heard of Praxis Lending Cooperative. I searched the entity. It was registered in Ohio, but its agent was a lawyer in a strip mall 3 towns over. It had no website, no board of directors listed. It was a black box. And this black box held a secured interest in almost everything my father owned: his equipment, his accounts receivable, and the old mill property. My father, the man who preached about clean optics and reputation, was borrowing millions from a ghost. I leaned back in my chair. Curiosity is a dangerous thing for a person who craves safety, but I could not stop. I needed to know the shape of the ruin. I logged into Summit Note Exchange. Summit was an online marketplace where banks and private lenders sold off their non-performing assets. It was eBay for bad debt. It was where the wreckage of the American dream was auctioned off to the highest bidder. I had an account there for Harborline. Usually, I filtered for small consumer portfolios: credit card charge-offs, medical bills, low risk, high volume. Today, I changed the filter: commercial real estate / distressed business loans / Ohio. The search wheel spun. Then, a list appeared. There were dozens of loans: failed restaurants, abandoned car washes, and there, halfway down the list, was a package titled SNE 4492, Secured Note, Mixed Collateral, Briar Glen. Oh, I clicked on it. The borrower name was redacted, simply listed as confidential construction entity, but the collateral description gave it away. Parcels 04-22 and 04-23, commonly known as the Old Mill Complex. It was my father's debt. I looked at the numbers. The face value of the note was $2 million. The asking price was $150,000. I blinked. That was not a discount. That was a fire sale. That was the price you put on something when you knew it was toxic, when the documentation was so bad or the borrower so litigious that you just wanted it off your books. I downloaded the teaser file, the preliminary documents available to potential bidders. It was a mess. The loan history was erratic. There were forbearance agreements that had been signed and broken. There were handwritten notes in the margins of the payment ledger. Messy files are how people hide things. Dorian Pike had taught me that years ago. When you see a file that looks like a dog's breakfast, he had said, it is not because they are incompetent. It is because they do not want you to see the straight line. I stared at the screen. If I bought this debt, I would become my father's creditor. The thought made my heart hammer against my ribs. It was a terrifying thought. It was also an intoxicating one. If I owned the debt, I would have the right to see the full file. I would have the right to audit the books. I would have the legal standing to demand the truth about the personal guarantee he had forged 7 years ago. I could finally clear my name. I could finally prove that I was not the liability he was. But was I doing this for truth? Or was I doing it for spite? I closed my eyes. I thought of Noah. I thought of the promise I had made to keep his life stable. Buying this debt would invite chaos. It would bring me back into Randall Wood's orbit. But the alternative was to let the lie stand. The alternative was to let my father continue to use my identity, my name, as a prop in his fraudulent empire. I opened my eyes. I was not doing this to hurt him. I was doing this to protect myself. I was doing this because a debt unpaid is a tether. And I wanted to cut the rope. I checked my business capital account. I had the money. It was the reserve I had been saving to expand Harborline, to hire a second employee. It was everything I had built. I typed in the bid amount, $150,000. I clicked Submit Bid. The screen flashed. Bid accepted. Pending settlement. My hands were shaking. I had just bought my father. I expected silence. I expected the usual bureaucratic delay of 24 hours while the trade settled. Instead, my phone rang 10 minutes later. It was an unknown number, a 212 area code. New York City. I picked it up. "This is Kennedy Wood." "Ms. Wood," a voice said. It was a male voice, smooth, polished, like expensive scotch poured over ice. "This is Miles Archer. I am a partner at the Archer Hale Legal Group." I paused. I did not know the firm, but the name sounded heavy, expensive. "I am not in the market for representation." "Mr. Archer," I said, my voice automatic. "I am not selling," he said. "I am calling because I have a Google alert set for certain SUSIP numbers and asset tags. It seems you just acquired a rather volatile note through Summit Exchange. One connected to a Mr. Randall Wood in Ohio." I went still. The trade had happened 10 minutes ago. "That is proprietary information." I said, "The market is smaller than you think." Miles Archer said, "And news travels fast when the asset is radioactive." "What do you want?" I asked. "I want to offer my services." He said, "Not as a salesman, but as a necessity. You have bought a piece of debt that has a very complicated history. Ms. Wood, you are going to need someone who knows how to navigate the mud without getting dirty. I can handle a collection." I said, "I run a portfolio. You run consumer medical debt." He countered, "I looked you up. You are very good at what you do. But this isn't a $500 copay. This is commercial fraud, distressed real estate, and a borrower who has a history of litigation. And, if I am not mistaken, a borrower who shares your last name." I said nothing. The silence stretched between us, humming with tension. "Look," he said, his tone shifting, becoming less corporate and more urgent. "I know Randall Wood. I know how he operates." "How?" I asked. "I used to work in Briar Glen," he said. "A long time ago. I was a junior associate at Finch Holloway." Finch Holloway. That was my father's law firm. They were the ones who drafted his contracts. They were the ones who sent the letters. I remember them. I said, "Then you know they are the gatekeepers." Miles said, "I was there for 2 years. I saw a file on Randall Wood's business dealings. It was irregular. When I asked questions about it, the file disappeared, and shortly after that, I was encouraged to look for opportunities elsewhere." I felt a prickle of recognition. He sounded like me. He sounded like someone who had been shown the door because he saw too much. "So you have an axe to grind." I said, "I have a memory," he corrected, "and I have a very specific set of skills regarding distressed debt and corporate piercing." "You bought that note for a reason. Ms. Wood, you suspect something. I can help you find it." I hesitated. His timing was too perfect. It felt predatory. But his credentials. I could hear the competence in his voice, and if he had worked at Finch Holloway, he knew where the bodies were buried. "I have conditions," I said. "Name them." 1. You work for me. You answer to me. If I say stop, we stop. Agreed. 2. This remains strictly professional. No media, no press releases. I do not want this to be a spectacle. I want an audit, not a circus. Discretion is my stock in trade. 3. You never, under any circumstances, contact my child or bring my personal life into this, if my son's name appears in a single filing. You are fired, and I will report you to the Bar Association. There was a pause. Then, I heard him exhale, a sound that was almost relief. "I have no interest in your son, Ms. Wood. I am interested in the truth. And I am interested in why a solvent construction company needs to borrow money from a shadow lender like Praxis." He knew about Praxis. "Send me the engagement letter." I said, "I will have it to you within the hour." I hung up the phone. My heart was still racing, but my mind was beginning to clear. I had a lawyer. I had the debt. The pieces were moving. The engagement letter arrived via secure email 40 minutes later. I read every word. It was standard. But the terms were fair. Limited scope, hourly billing with a cap. I signed it digitally and sent it back. The next morning. The full loan file from Summit Note Exchange was released to my secure server. I sat at my desk with a cup of coffee that had gone cold. I locked the door to my office. I wanted to be alone for this. The file was over 400 pages. It was a digital stack of PDFs, tax returns, balance sheets, property appraisals. I scrolled through them, my eyes scanning for anomalies. The financials were grim. Woodridge Structural was bleeding cash. The overhead was massive. The payments to Praxis Lending Cooperative were exorbitant, interest rates that bordered on usury. Why would Randall agree to this? He was a shark. He did not sign bad deals, unless he had no choice, unless he was being squeezed. I kept scrolling. I found the loan agreement for the note I had just bought. It was dated 7 years ago, April 14th, the date again. It haunted me. I scrolled to the signature page. My breath hitched in my throat. There it was. Randall Wood, President, Woodridge Structural. His signature was bold, aggressive, the pen strokes cutting deep into the paper, and below it, Guarantor, Kennedy Wood. I zoomed in on the signature. It was my name. It was written in blue ink. I traced the loops of the K and the D on my screen. It looked like my signature. It looked exactly like the way I signed my name when I was 27. The slant was right. The pressure was right. But I knew, with the bone-deep certainty of a woman who remembers every trauma, that I had not signed it. I looked closer. I was a document specialist now. I knew what to look for, the start and stop points of the ink, the fluidity. It was too perfect. It lacked the microscopic hesitations of a hand moving in real time. It was a simulation, or a trace. Someone had taken a sample of my signature, maybe from a birthday card, maybe from an insurance form, and they had practiced it. They had practiced it until they could put it on a $2 million liability and fool a bank. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. It was not just financial fraud, it was a violation. It was my father looking at his daughter and seeing a tool he could use to fix a leak in his boat. I picked up my phone and dialed Miles Archer. He answered on the first ring. "Archer, I have the file," I said. My voice was low, dangerous. "And?" "I'm looking at the signature page," I said. "It is dated the week I told him I was pregnant, the week he kicked me out." "Is it yours?" Miles asked. "It is a forgery," I said. "A good one, but I didn't sign it." "Then we have him," Miles said. His voice was grimly satisfied. "Fraud in the inducement. Void ab initio. We can tear the whole loan apart." "No," I said. There was a silence on the line. "No? We do not tear it apart yet," I said. I looked at the signature, at the lie that had defined my 20s. If we sue him now, he will settle. He will claim it was a mistake. He will pay a fine and walk away. What do you want to do? "I want to know who else signed it." I said, "I want to know who notarized it. I want to know who at the bank accepted it. And I want to know why he needed it so badly that he was willing to commit a felony against his own child." I took a breath. "We are not going to sue him. Miles, not yet. We are going to audit him. We are going to demand the original wet ink documents. We are going to pull the thread until the whole sweater unravels." I could hear Miles smiling on the other end of the line. It was a sharp, shark-like sound. "Very well. Ms. Wood, I will draft the notice of default and demand for inspection. We will serve him on Monday." "Do it," I said. I hung up the phone. I looked at the forged signature one last time. Kennedy Wood. That girl was gone. The woman who replaced her was ready to collect. I saved the file. I encrypted the folder. Then I stood up, put on my coat, and walked out of the office to pick up my son from school. The sky was clearing over Portland. The sun was breaking through the gray clouds, illuminating the wet pavement. I walked with a fast, steady rhythm. I had bought the debt. I had hired the lawyer. The mechanism was in motion. My father had called me a liability. He was about to find out that I was the most expensive thing he had ever owned. The drive to the school was short. I parked the car and watched the children pouring out of the double doors. I saw Noah instantly. He was wearing his yellow raincoat. his backpack bouncing against his shoulders. He saw me and his face lit up. He ran toward me, bypassing the puddle he usually jumped in. "Mom!" he yelled. I crouched down and opened my arms. He collided with me, solid and real and warm. I buried my face in his neck, smelling the scent of crayons and rain. "Hey, Peanut," I said. "Guess what?" he said, pulling back, his eyes wide. "We learned about sharks today. Did you know they have rows and rows of teeth? So if one falls out, another one just moves up?" I smoothed his hair back from his forehead. I did know that. I said, "They are very efficient." "Yeah," he said, "and they never stop swimming. If they stop, they sink." I stood up, holding his hand. I squeezed it gently, feeling the small, fragile bones that I would burn down the world to protect. "We are like that too. Noah," I said, "we never stop swimming." He looked at me, confused but trusting. "Are we sharks?" I looked at the calm, suburban street. I thought about the document on my server. I thought about Miles Archer and his hidden agenda. I thought about Randall Wood and his failing kingdom. "Sometimes," I said, "when we have to be." We walked to the car together. I strapped him into his booster seat. I checked the mirror. My eyes looked back at me, hard and clear. I drove home, the tires humming on the asphalt. The game had changed. I was no longer the victim of the story. I was the author of the ending, and I was going to make sure that when the final line was written, the math added up. The week passed in a blur of preparation. Miles was efficient. He sent me drafts of the letters. They were masterpieces of legal aggression wrapped in polite language, pursuant to the terms of the note. Strict compliance required. Immediate inspection of collateral. I approved them all. On Friday night, I sat on my couch with a glass of wine. Noah was asleep. The house was quiet. I opened the physical mail that I had neglected all week. Bills, a flyer for a pizza place, and a small, cream-colored envelope. It had no return address. The handwriting was looped and decorative. I opened it. It was a card. On the front was a picture of a sailboat. Inside, there was a handwritten note. "Kennedy, I heard a rumor at the club. Someone is asking questions about the old mill debt. Someone is buying paper. Your father is terrified. He thinks it is a competitor. He thinks it is the end. If it is you, please, be careful. The people he owes money to, Praxis, they are not like us. They are not just a bank. They are the people who lend when the banks say no. They are the reason he sent you away. He was afraid for you. Stop before it is too late. M. Marla." I stared at the letter. He was afraid for you. It was the first time anyone had suggested that my expulsion was an act of protection, not rejection. I felt a sudden, confusing pang of doubt. Could it be true? Could Randall have kicked me out to keep me safe from these shadow lenders? I remembered the phone call, risk profile, covenant. No, I hardened my heart. If he wanted to protect me, he could have sent me away with money. He could have told me the truth. He could have been a father. Instead, he forged my name and threw me to the wolves. If he was afraid of Praxis, that was his problem. I was not afraid. I was the one holding the note now. I took the letter and walked to the kitchen sink. I held the corner of it to the flame of a lighter. I watched the cream-colored paper curl and blacken. I watched the words "afraid for you" disappear into ash. I dropped the burning paper into the sink and turned on the tap. The water washed the ash away. I went back to the living room. I picked up my phone. I sent a text to Miles. "Serve the papers." The response came back instantly. "Consider it done." I turned off the lights. I went to bed. I slept the sleep of the righteous. Or perhaps the sleep of the shark. I did not dream. I simply waited for the blood in the water. The legal machinery of a default is not dramatic. It is quiet, paper-heavy, and relentless. It is a war of inches fought with certified mail and time-stamped receipts. Miles Archer was a surgeon with the paperwork. We did not storm the castle. We simply pointed out that the drawbridge was structurally unsound. We started with a demand for inspection of records, a right granted to me as the holder of the note. We followed it with a notice of default, based on technical violations of the loan covenants, ratios that were off, insurance policies that had lapsed, and reporting deadlines that had been missed. We were not suing for the money yet. We were squeezing the air out of the room. My office in Portland became a war room. I had the physical file of the loan spread out across my desk, mapping the chain of title. I traced the money from the original lender to the shell companies, to the bank, and finally to the Summit Note Exchange. Every transfer was documented, every stamp verified. I wanted to make sure that when Randall Wood tried to claim I had no standing, I could bury him in proof. 3 days after we served the papers, Randall responded. He did not have his lawyer write a formal rebuttal. He did not ask for a meeting. Instead, he sent an email to my old personal address, the one I had not used since I was 27. I sat in my office, the gray main light filtering through the blinds, and read the words of the man who had raised me. Subject: Unbelievable Kennedy. I received the package from your lawyer. I assume this is your idea of a joke, or perhaps just another desperate cry for attention. I always knew you were unstable, but I never thought you would sink to the level of financial extortion against your own family. You are ungrateful. I gave you a roof, an education, and a name, and you threw it all away because you could not control yourself. You were a liability then, and you are a liability now. Do not think for a second that this stunt scares me. I have friends in this town who know exactly what kind of person you are. If you proceed with this, you will be the one who ends up with nothing. Drop this nonsense. Sign the release. Go back to whatever life you managed to scrape together and leave the business to the adults. R.W. I read it twice. Then I read it a third time. I looked for the denial. I looked for the sentence where he said, "I never forged your signature." I looked for the line where he said, "That guarantee is fake. It was not there." He attacked my character. He attacked my stability. He attacked my history. But he did not attack the facts, because he knew the facts were bulletproof. He never claimed the signature was genuine. He simply claimed I had no right to use it against him. It was the logic of a narcissist. The crime was not that he had stolen my identity. The crime was that I had caught him. I forwarded the email to Miles. Add this to the file. I wrote, "Admission by omission." Then I packed a bag. I could not do this from Maine anymore. The paper trail was in Ohio. The truth was buried in the filing cabinets of the Briar Glen County Recorder's Office, and in the silence of the people who had watched me leave 7 years ago. I had to go back. I left Noah with Tessa. It was the hardest decision I had made since the day I boarded the bus. Noah had never spent more than a night away from me. I sat him down on the rug in the living room, holding his small hands in mine. "I have to go on a work trip. Peanut," I said, "just for a few days." "To the ocean?" he asked. "No." "To a town called Briar Glen. Is that where you are from?" I hesitated. "Yes, but it is not where I live. You live here. This is our home. I did not take him. I would not take him. Briar Glen was a place of ghosts and judgment, and I would not let that atmosphere touch my son. He was clean. He was new. He belonged to the coast and the salt air, not the heavy, humid valley of my childhood. I drove my sedan, the same one I had bought used 3 years ago. The drive took 11 hours. As I crossed the state line into Ohio, the landscape flattened. The trees changed from pine to oak and maple. The air grew heavier. I booked a room at the Juniper House, a small inn on the outskirts of town. It was modest, clean, and anonymous. I did not want to stay at the main hotel downtown where people might recognize me. I checked in under the name of my LLC. Harbor Line. The town looked exactly the same brick storefronts on Main Street, the same gazebo in the town square, the same sign welcoming visitors to Briar Glen. A tradition of excellence. It felt like walking into a museum of my own trauma. The next morning, I went to the county recorder's office. It was located in the basement of the courthouse, a room that smelled of dust and toner. I did not need a lawyer for this. I knew how to search public records. I had spent the last 5 years teaching myself how to track assets through the labyrinth of bureaucracy. I sat at one of the public terminals and typed in my name, Kennedy Wood. I expected to find nothing. I had never owned property here. I had never taken out a mortgage. The screen refreshed. There were 4 results. My heart hammered against my ribs. I clicked on the first one. Lien release. Woodridge Structural/K. Wood. It was dated 6 years ago. 1 year after I had left. I requested the physical document. The clerk, a woman with tired eyes who did not look at me, handed me a microfiche reel. I threaded it into the reader and scrolled until I found the image. It was a standard release of a mechanic's lien, but in the legal description. It listed the guarantors who were being released from liability on a specific project: Randall Wood, Marla Wood, Kennedy Wood. I stared at the glowing green screen. My name was listed as a guarantor for a construction project I had never heard of, for a building I had never entered. I checked the other 3 results. They were similar: UCC financing statements, credit line modifications, all of them listing Kennedy Wood as a secondary obligor. My father had not just used my signature once for the bank loan, he had used my identity as a recurring asset. He had kept me on the books for years after I was gone, likely using that same simulated signature to renew credit lines and satisfy bonding requirements. He had turned me into a ghost employee, a silent partner who bore all the risk and none of the reward. And the terrifying part was how mundane it looked. It was just a name typed on a government form. Kennedy Wood. To the clerk, to the bank, to the state of Ohio. I was a willing participant in Woodridge Structural. If the company failed, and it was failing, the creditors would not just come for Randall. They would come for me. They would come for the assets I had built in Maine. They would come for Noah's college fund. This was not just about the past. It was an active threat to my future. I printed every page. My hands were shaking, not with fear, but with a cold, clarifying rage. He had not just kicked me out. He had kept me hostage on paper. I walked out of the courthouse and into the bright, flat sunlight. I needed answers that paper could not give. I took out my phone and texted my mother. I am in town. Meet me at Maplestone in 1 hour. Come alone. I did not wait for a reply. I knew she would come. Marla Wood lived in terror of a scene, but she lived in even greater terror of the silence between us. Maplestone was a coffee shop that had opened after I left. It was neutral ground. I sat at a table in the back corner, facing the door. I ordered a black coffee and watched the entrance. Marla walked in 10 minutes early. She looked older. Her hair was still perfectly coiffed, a helmet of blonde highlights, but her face was drawn. There were lines around her mouth that spoke of years of biting her tongue. She wore a cardigan that looked too big for her. She saw me and froze. Then she rushed over, her eyes filling with tears. "Kennedy," she breathed. "Oh, look at you. You look so professional." She reached out to hug me. I did not stand up. I did not lean in. I stayed seated, my hands folded on the table. "Sit down." "Mother," I said. She flinched at the coldness in my voice, but she sat. She placed her purse on the table, clutching it like a shield. "I missed you so much," she said, her voice trembling. "When I got your text, is Noah with you? Is he here?" "No," I said. "He is safe at home, where he belongs." Her face crumpled. "I just want to see him." "Kennedy, I am his grandmother. You are the woman who watched me get thrown out of the house." I said, "You are the woman who sat there eating roast beef while Randall told me I was a liability. You do not get to be a grandmother just because you share DNA." "Kennedy, please," she whispered, looking around to see if anyone was watching. "It was not like that. You do not understand the pressure he was under." "I understand the pressure." I said. I pulled the folder from my bag and slid the printed lien release across the table. "I understand that Randall has been using my name on legal documents for 7 years. I understand that I am listed as a guarantor on loans I never signed." Marla looked at the paper. She did not read it. She just stared at it, her face paling. "You knew," I said. It was not a question. She looked down at her hands. "Kennedy? Did you sign them?" I asked. "Did you forge my name?" "No," she said. looking up, shocked. No, I would never. Then who did? She bit her lip. Her eyes darted to the window. He has a stamp, she whispered. A stamp. He had a signature stamp made. She said, from an old birthday card you gave him. He said it was just for administrative things, for the insurance. He said it was easier than mailing things back and forth to you. He kicked me out. Mom, he did not want to mail things to me. He wanted me gone so I wouldn't ask why the bank was calling. Marla began to cry, silent, weeping tears that ran down her makeup. He was scared. Kennedy, you have to believe that. The business it has been drowning for a long time, since before you got pregnant. I leaned forward. Why was the bank contacting me back then? Why did he talk about covenants that night? Marla took a napkin and dabbed her eyes. She took a deep breath. It wasn't the bank. She said, What? Crownstead Bank is just the front. She said, the real money that keeps the company floating. It comes from the Heritage Club. I frowned. The Heritage Club was the private social club in town. Old money, golf courses, expensive dinners. The club lends money? There is a group, she said, a private investment group. They call themselves the Syndicate. They lend to local businesses that cannot get traditional financing. High interest, strict rules. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a fear that seemed genuine. When the market turned in 2015, Randall was over-leveraged. The bank cut him off. The syndicate stepped in. But they have conditions. They demand total control. They demand clean files. Clean files. They audit everything. Marla said, they look for any risk, any litigation, any loose ends. When you got pregnant, I felt a chill go down my spine. When I got pregnant, I became a risk. I said, Randall said the syndicate would see an unwed daughter as a sign of instability. Marla whispered, he said they would call the loans. He said they would take the house. He told me we had to send you away to clean up the risk profile. I sat back. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. He did not kick me out because of shame. He did not kick me out because of morality. He kicked me out because his loan sharks wanted a tidy spreadsheet. My pregnancy was a line item that needed to be deleted. And the forged signature? I asked. Collateral, she said. The syndicate wanted every family member on the hook. They wanted to know that if Randall ran, they could come after everyone. He stamped your name so they would feel secure. I looked at the weeping woman across from me. I felt a strange detachment. She was not a villain. She was just a coward. But in my world, cowardice was just as destructive as malice. Who manages the syndicate? I asked. I do not know, she said. Randall never says names. He just calls them the club. I stood up. I had what I needed. Kennedy. Wait, Marla said, reaching for my hand. Please, do not destroy him. He is old. He is sick. If you expose this, the syndicate, they are dangerous. I pulled my hand away. He should have thought of that before he made me a partner. I said, I left her sitting there, crying into her napkin. I walked out into the cool air. My mind racing. It was not just fraud. It was organized. It was a system, and I had just bought a ticket to the center of it. I called Miles from the car. We need to talk. I said, I am in a meeting. He said. His voice was clipped. I do not care. I am in Briar Glen. I know about the syndicate. I know about the Heritage Club. There was a silence on the line. A long, heavy silence. Where are you? He asked. I'm going back to my hotel. The Juniper House. Do not go there, he said. Meet me at the law library in the county courthouse. It is private. Why? Because you just said the word syndicate on an open line. Kennedy, meet me in 20 minutes. I drove to the courthouse. The law library was empty. Rows of dusty books standing like sentinels. Miles was waiting for me at a wooden table in the back. He looked impeccable in his suit. But his eyes were tight. You came to town, he said. I told you to stay in Maine. I needed to see the records, I said, and I saw them. He has been using a signature stamp for years, And my mother tells me the debt is held by a private group at the Heritage Club. Miles nodded slowly. I suspected as much. You suspected? I asked, my voice rising. You said you knew Randall was shady. You did not say you knew he was involved with loan sharks. I said I knew the file was irregular. Miles said calmly, Kennedy, listen to me. This is why I wanted to handle this procedurally. If we push too hard, if we start subpoenaing the Heritage Club directly. What? They kill us? No. They bury the evidence. They restructure the debt. They make the paper trail disappear. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something behind his polished veneer. Unease. I think we should settle, he said. I stared at him. Settle? We just started. Randall is scared, Miles said. I have had indications. He is willing to pay to make this go away. We can get a lump sum. We can get a release of the guarantee. You can walk away with a profit and your name cleared. Indications from whom? I asked. You are not supposed to be talking to him. I speak to opposing counsel. Miles said. It is my job. Who is representing him? A firm called Archer Hale usually handles. No, I cut him off. Who is representing him on this? On the Praxis debt? Miles hesitated. Just for a fraction of a second. But I saw it. You are talking to Praxis, aren't you? I said, Kennedy, Praxis is the majority creditor. If we want to enforce your position, we have to coordinate with them. You are negotiating with the people who ordered my father to kick me out? I demanded. I am negotiating leverage. Miles snapped. His calm facade cracked. Look, you hired me to get a result. The result is getting you out of this mess with a check in your hand. Praxis is willing to buy your note. They are willing to pay a premium to consolidate their position. He leaned forward. Sell the note to Praxis. Kennedy, take the win. If you fight them, if you try to expose the Heritage Club, you are going to get crushed. These people own the town. I looked at him. I looked at the expensive suit, the manicured nails. He wasn't protecting me. He was brokering a deal. He was trying to facilitate a transfer of power from my father to Praxis. And he wanted me to be the lubricant. You didn't tell me you were talking to them. I said quietly, I am telling you now. You are fired. I said, Kennedy, be reasonable. You are fired. Miles, I will send a formal notice to your firm by close of business. Do not bill me for this trip. I turned and walked out of the library. My heart was pounding. I was alone. My lawyer was compromised. My father was a fraud. My mother was a coward. I walked out to my car. I sat in the driver's seat and locked the doors. I needed to think. I needed to understand who Praxis was. I pulled out my phone and opened the local news app for Briar Glen. I searched for Praxis Lending. Nothing. I searched for Heritage Club Board. A list of names came up. Doctors, judges, and then a recent article about a charity golf tournament sponsored by the club. New leadership drives Heritage Club forward. I scrolled down to the photo. A group of men in polo shirts standing on a green, and there, standing on the far right, holding a trophy, was a face I knew better than my own. He was older, he was heavier, but the smile was the same, the easy, charming, hollow smile. Evan Mercer, Director of Operations, Praxis Lending Cooperative. The phone slipped from my hand and clattered onto the floor mat. Evan, the father of my child. The man who had panicked and run away because his numbers were down. He wasn't in Columbus. He wasn't in medical sales. He was here, in Briar Glen, working for the entity that held my father's throat in its hand. I stared at the dashboard. The man who abandoned me was now the man collecting the debt from the man who kicked me out. It was a circle, a perfect, poisonous circle. Evan wasn't just a deadbeat dad. He was the mid-level manager of the risk cleanup operation. Had he known? 7 years ago, when he ran, did he know about the pressure on Randall? Or was it just a coincidence? In my line of work, there are no coincidences. I picked up my phone. I saw the cracked screen. I felt a surge of nausea, followed by a surge of adrenaline. Miles wanted me to sell the note to Praxis. He wanted me to hand the weapon over to Evan Mercer. I closed my eyes. I thought of Noah. I had come here to get the truth. I had come here to clear my name. But now, the stakes had changed. If I exposed this, I would not just be taking down my father. I would be taking down the father of my son. I would be exploding the anonymity I had built for Noah. I could leave. I could take Miles's advice, sell the note, take the money, and disappear back to Maine. It would be the safe choice. It would be the smart choice. But then I thought about the signature stamp. I thought about the risk profile. I thought about my mother crying in the cafe. If I sold the note, I was letting them win. I was letting them treat me, and my son, as a transaction. I opened my eyes. I am not a transaction. I said to the empty car. I started the engine. I was not going to sell. I was not going to settle. I was going to find out exactly what Evan Mercer knew, and I was going to make sure that when this house of cards fell, I was the one deciding which way the wind blew. I pulled out of the parking lot. I was done with lawyers. I was done with being polite. I was going to see my father. And this time, I wasn't going to ask for permission to speak. The war did not begin with a shout. It began with a filing fee of $250 and a stack of paper 3 inches thick, delivered by a process server to the front desk of Woodridge Structural. I had re-engaged Miles Archer, but the terms had changed. He was no longer my advisor. He was my instrument. I needed his signature on the motions, his standing with the court, and his knowledge of the local statutes. But the strategy was mine. We filed a petition for verification of debt and a motion to compel production of original instruments. It was dry, procedural, and utterly unexciting to anyone outside the legal profession. But to a man like Randall Wood, who had built his empire on the fluid, handshake nature of small-town influence, it was a chokehold. We were not alleging fraud yet. We were simply asking, with polite, terrifying persistence, for the original wet ink promissory note and the original guarantee agreement. We were asking for the metadata of the electronic files. We were asking for the notary's logbook. The response from the town of Briar Glen was immediate, but it did not come in the form of a legal brief. It came as a low, murmuring frequency that I could feel the moment I stepped outside the Juniper House. My father was not fighting me in court. He was fighting me at the Rotary Club. He was fighting me in the vestibule of the First Methodist Church. He was fighting me in the checkout line at the grocery store. I went to pick up a coffee at Maplestone 3 days after the filing. The girl behind the counter, who had smiled at me the day before, would not meet my eyes. She took my cash with 2 fingers, as if the bills were contaminated. At the table next to me, 2 women in tennis skirts lowered their voices. I heard snippets of their conversation, sharp and intentional. Ungrateful, really, after everything he did for her, trying to bankrupt him. Mental instability runs in the family. You know. I sat there and drank my black coffee. The heat of the ceramic cup burned my fingers, grounding me. Randall was controlling the narrative. He was painting a portrait of a prodigal daughter who had returned not to seek forgiveness, but to extort the father who had saved her from her own youthful indiscretions. He was leveraging the town's memory of me, the pregnant, unmarried 27-year-old who had fled in the night, to them. I was messy. I was a liability. The old shame flared in my chest, hot and suffocating. It was the same feeling I had sat with at the dining room table 7 years ago. The feeling that I was wrong, that I was taking up too much space, that I was the problem, but I was not 27 anymore, and I was not operating on feelings. I went back to my hotel room and opened my laptop. I had an email from Marrow and Klein Forensics. I had hired them to analyze the high-resolution scan of the guarantee agreement. They were expensive, billing at $400 an hour, but they were the best. They did not care about small-town gossip. They cared about ink density and stroke direction. I opened the report. Conclusion: highly probable simulation. I read the analysis. The examiner noted that the signature on the guarantee lacked the natural variation of a spontaneous signature. The pressure points were too even. The speed of the writing was too slow. indicated by microscopic tremors in the loops of the letters. The evidence suggests the signature was not written fluently, but rather drawn or copied from a model source. It was not just a forgery. It was a simulation. Someone had taken an old document of mine, a birthday card, a permission slip, a tax form, and they had practiced my name. They had sat at a desk, perhaps my father's mahogany desk, and they had traced the curves of my identity until they could replicate it well enough to fool a bank officer who wasn't looking too closely. I felt a cold, hard satisfaction settle over me. The shame in my chest evaporated, replaced by the steel spine of objective truth. They could whisper in the church pews all they wanted. I had the science. I forwarded the report to Miles with a simple subject line: leverage. Miles called me 20 minutes later. "This changes the posture," he said. His voice was brisk, professional. But underneath it, I heard the same tightness I had detected in the law library. "How so?" I asked. "It moves us from civil dispute to potential criminal liability," he said. "If we enter this into the record, we are accusing a pillar of the community of a felony. And not just Randall, the notary, the bank officer who witnessed it. You are widening the blast radius. That is the point. Miles, Kennedy, listen to me," he said, his tone shifting into that reasonable, conciliatory register that I was beginning to despise. "This report is a heavy weapon, but if you fire it, you cannot unfire it. I have been in communication with the other side." "The other side," I repeated. "You mean Praxis?" "I mean counsel for the debt holders." He said, dodging the name, "They are aware that the documentation has vulnerabilities. They are prepared to make a significant offer to resolve the guarantee issue without litigation." "What kind of offer?" "They will void the guarantee," Miles said. "You will be released from all liability, and they will pay a settlement of $50,000 for your administrative inconvenience. In exchange, you sign a confidentiality agreement, surrender the note you bought, and return to Maine." I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. $50,000, I said. "To buy my silence? To let them keep doing this? To let you move on?" Miles pressed. "Kennedy, this is a win. You came here to clear your name. This clears it. You walk away with a profit and a clean credit report. Why do you need to burn the house down?" "Because the house is rotten." I said. "There is something else, isn't there?" I asked, lowering my voice. "You are pushing too hard. Miles, you are supposed to be my advocate, but you sound like their broker. Why are you so afraid of this going to court?" There was a long silence on the line. "I am not afraid," he said. "I am pragmatic." "No," I said. "It is personal. I looked you up." "Miles, I dug a little deeper into your time at Finch and Holloway." The silence on the other end grew heavy. "You were the junior associate on the Woodridge file back in 2015. I said, "Just before I was kicked out. There was a complaint filed with the state licensing board about falsified contractor affidavits. It disappeared, and 2 months later, you were let go." I waited. "I didn't falsify them," Miles said quietly. His voice was stripped of its polish. It sounded young and bitter. "I found them. I found the affidavits where Randall had inflated the completion percentages to draw down more cash from the bank. I took them to the senior partner. I thought I was doing the right thing. And I was told that I didn't understand the local ecosystem," Miles said. "The complaint was buried. My review was tanked. I was blackballed from every major firm in the county. I had to move to New York to find work." "So why help me?" I asked. "Why come back?" "Because I wanted to see him sweat," Miles admitted. "When I saw you bought the debt, I thought this was it, the reckoning. But I know who is behind him. Kennedy, it is not just Randall. It is the Heritage Club. It is the money that paves the roads and builds the libraries. If you expose the fraud, you don't just hurt Randall. You hurt the firm that buried me, yes, but you also trigger a recall on loans all over town." He paused. "I want to win, Kennedy, but I don't want to be the guy who nuked his hometown. I still have family here." I listened to his breathing, He was compromised. Yes, but he was also human. He was a victim of the same machine that had chewed me up. The difference was, he was willing to settle for survival. I was not. I understand. Miles, I said, but I'm not signing the confidentiality agreement, and I am not selling the note. Kennedy, file the forensic report. I said, attach it to the motion for summary judgment. He sighed. It was the sound of a man watching a car crash in slow motion. I will file it tomorrow morning. I hung up. I sat in the silence of the hotel room, watching the dust motes dance in the light. I was alone again, or so I thought. That evening, my phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I did not recognize. I didn't know. Please believe that. I stared at the screen. I did not need to ask who it was. Meet me. 10 minutes. The parking lot behind the library. Please. I should have ignored it. I should have blocked the number. But curiosity is a flaw I had never managed to conquer, and deep down, a part of me, the 27-year-old part, needed to look him in the eye. I drove to the library. It was closed. The parking lot illuminated by a single flickering streetlight. I saw a silver Audi parked in the corner. Evan Mercer got out as I pulled up. He was wearing a suit, no tie. He looked successful. He looked like the kind of man who played golf on weekends and complained about property taxes. I got out of my car but stayed by the door, keeping the metal barrier between us. Kennedy, he said. He took a step forward, then stopped when he saw my face. You look good, tougher. State your business. Evan, I said. I saw the text. He said, I saw the filing drafts. Praxis got a copy. So you are working for them. I said, I manage the portfolio. He said, it is just a job. Kennedy, I didn't know it was you. I knew Randall was the borrower, obviously, but I didn't know about the guarantee. I didn't know he used your name. And you didn't know I was pregnant? I asked. He looked down at his expensive shoes. I panicked. He said softly, back then, I was a kid. I was scared. I thought you would figure it out. I didn't know he kicked you out. I thought you just moved away. It was a believable lie. It was the kind of lie men tell themselves so they can sleep at night. He hadn't known the specifics, so he absolved himself of the generalities. I have a son. Evan. I said, his name is Noah. He is 7 years old. He likes the ocean, and he is smarter than both of us, and you are never going to meet him. Evan flinched. Kennedy, come on. If I am the father, you are a biological donor. I said, you forfeited the title of father when you ran away. And now? Now you are a mid-level manager for a loan shark operation that is trying to bury me. Do you really think I would let you near him? He looked up, and I saw the calculation in his eyes. The sentimentality vanished, replaced by the corporate operator. Look, he said, his voice hardening slightly. I can help you. Praxis is worried. They don't like the forensic report. They don't like the noise. I'm sure they don't. Tell me what you found. He said, in the files. The deeper files. If you tell me what you have on the Heritage Club connection, I can insulate you. I can get you a better number than 50,000. I can get you serious money. I stared at him. He wasn't here to apologize. He wasn't here to see his son. He was here on a reconnaissance mission. He wanted to know how much I knew so he could price my silence accurately. You are small, Evan. I said, you were small then, and you are small now. Kennedy, be realistic. You are one woman against the syndicate. I am not just a woman. I said, I am a creditor, and I am collecting. I got back in my car. Kennedy, he shouted, slapping his hand on the window. Don't do this. They will ruin you. I drove away. I did not look back. I did not cry. I felt only a cold, clarifying revulsion. The next morning, the summons came. Not a legal one, a personal one. Randall called me. Come to the house, he said. His voice sounded raspy. Tired. 11 o'clock. No lawyers. Just us. I went. The house looked the same, but smaller. The hedges were overgrown. The paint on the porch railing was peeling. The optics were failing. Marla was not there. Randall was sitting in the den, the room where I had overheard him 7 years ago. He was sitting in his leather chair, a blanket draped over his legs. He looked frail. The arrogance was still there, but it was brittle now. "You caused quite a mess," he said, gesturing to a chair. I remained standing. "I am cleaning up the mess." "Randall, there is a difference." He chuckled, a wet rattling sound. "You always were literal." He picked up a folder from the side table. "I am prepared to make a concession," he said. He opened the folder. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "I will sign this," he said. "It is an affidavit. It states that the inclusion of your name on the guarantee was an administrative error caused by a clerical mix-up at the office. It states that you are not, and never were, liable for the debt." I looked at the paper. It was a lie, but it was a useful lie. It cleared me. "And in exchange?" I asked. "In exchange," he said, "you will sell the note you purchased to an entity called Green Valley Holdings. They are a subsidiary of the Heritage Club. They will pay you $175,000. That is a $25,000 profit for you." He looked at me, his eyes gleaming with a desperate hope. "You win. Kennedy, you get your name back. You get a profit. You get to go back to Maine and play house with the boy. And I get to retire without a felony indictment." It was the exit ramp. It was everything Miles had wanted me to take, plus a confession. "Why?" I asked. "Why does the Heritage Club care so much? Why are they willing to buy me out?" Randall sighed. He looked out the window at the overgrown lawn. "Because they own everything. Kennedy, Woodridge isn't the only one. They hold the paper on the bakery, the dry cleaner, the hardware store. When the banks stopped lending to this town, the club stepped in. They kept Briar Glen alive." He turned back to me. "If you expose the fraud, if you prove that they were accepting forged documents and bypassing regulations, the state regulators will come in. They will freeze the assets. They will call the loans." He leaned forward, his hands shaking. "The bakery will close. The hardware store will fold. 50 families will lose their income. My crews, guys you went to high school with, will be out of work." He pointed a finger at me. "You think you are punishing me? Fine, punish me. But if you blow this up, you are punishing the whole town. You are burning down the village to kill the wolf." I stood there, the affidavit on the table between us. He was right. That was the terrible, twisting knife of it. He was a fraud, and the system was corrupt. But the system was also the life support for the innocent. If I pursued total justice, if I dragged the Heritage Club into open court and exposed the syndicate, I would cause a recession in Briar Glen. I would hurt people who had never done anything to me. But if I signed the paper, if I took the money and left, then the rot stayed. The forgery stayed hidden. Evan Mercer kept climbing the ladder, and the next time they needed a liability to cover their risk, they would find another 27-year-old girl to sacrifice. I looked at my father. I saw the fear in his eyes. He wasn't afraid of jail. He was afraid of being the man who destroyed the town. "I cannot sign this," I said. "Kennedy, don't be a fool. I am not a fool," I said, "and I am not a martyr. And I am not a villain." I reached out and took the affidavit. I folded it and put it in my pocket. "I'm keeping this," I said. "As proof that you know it is a lie, I am not selling the note. Randall, not to Green Valley, not to Praxis. Then what do you want?" he shouted, his voice cracking. "Blood? No," I said. "I want the truth. In public." I walked to the door. "There is a hearing on Thursday," I said, "the hearing for the summary judgment." I stopped and looked back at him. "I am going to present the forensic report. I am going to present the timeline. But I am not going to ask the judge to dissolve the company." "Then what?" he whispered. "I am going to ask the judge to appoint a receiver." I said, "An independent auditor to take over Woodridge Structural and the debt portfolio. Someone who isn't from the Heritage Club. Someone who follows the law." Randall went pale. "An auditor. That will expose everything." "Yes," I said, "but it will save the company. It will restructure the debt. Not call it. It will clean the wound instead of cutting off the limb. It will ruin my reputation, he said. Everyone will know. I looked at him, feeling a sudden, deep exhaustion. Your reputation was ruined 7 years ago. Dad, you just haven't realized it yet. I walked out of the house. I had chosen the hard path, the risky path, the path that offered no money and no guarantee of safety. I was going to court. I was going to face Miles, and Evan, and Randall. I was going to hold the line between vengeance and justice. I got into my car and checked my phone. I had a picture from Tessa. It was Noah, sitting on the floor with Salty, building a tower of blocks. He is asking when you are coming home. Tessa wrote, "Soon." I typed back, "I just have one more wall to take down." I put the phone away. I had 48 hours to prepare for the showdown. I needed to be sharper than I had ever been. I needed to be the shark that never stopped swimming, because in Briar Glen, the water was full of blood, and I was the only one who knew how to hunt. The morning of the final hearing did not bring a sunrise. It brought a low gray ceiling of clouds that pressed down on Briar Glen, trapping the humidity and the secrets in the valley. I woke up at 6 in the morning at the Juniper House. I did not hit the snooze button. I did not lie in bed staring at the ceiling. I got up, I showered, and I put on the navy blue suit I had brought from Maine. It was a suit I wore when I met with hospital administrators to negotiate 6-figure settlements. It was armor. I ate oatmeal and drank black coffee. I checked my email. I checked the weather in Harbor Point. Then I called home. "Hey, Mom," Noah said. His voice was a burst of color in the gray morning. "Aunt Tessa let me stay up late. We watched a movie about robots." "That sounds excellent." "Peanut," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Did you brush your teeth?" "Yes." "Mom?" "Yeah?" "When you come back, can we get pizza? The one with the extra cheese?" "We can get 2 pizzas," I said. "I will be home soon." I hung up the phone and felt the tightness in my chest loosen just a fraction. That was my reality. The boy who wanted extra cheese, the townhouse with the paid-off mortgage, the life I had built from scrap. Everything that was about to happen in the mediation room was just noise. It was just paperwork that needed to be filed so I could close the case file on my childhood. I drove to the courthouse. The mediation was scheduled for 10 o'clock in a conference room on the 3rd floor. It was a closed session, ordered by the judge to see if we could resolve the sensitive family matters before they became public record. Miles met me in the lobby. He looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes, but his suit was pressed, and his briefcase was heavy. "Ready?" he asked. I adjusted my cuff. "As I will ever be. They are all up there," he said. "Randall, Marla, and a representative from Praxis. Evan." I said. Miles nodded. "He is listed as the agent for the creditor. Let's go," I said. The conference room was windowless. The air conditioner hummed with a rattling, mechanical sound. There was a long oval table in the center. On one side sat my parents. Randall looked smaller than he had at the house. He was wearing a suit that hung loosely on his frame, his neck looking thin in the collar. Marla sat next to him, staring at her hands. She looked like she was waiting for a bomb to go off. On the far end of the table sat Evan Mercer. He nodded at me, a tight professional nod that made my stomach turn. And at the head of the table sat the mediator, a retired judge named Mr. Henderson, who looked like he wanted to be on a golf course. We took our seats. The silence was thick enough to choke on. "Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. "We are here to discuss the matter of the promissory note held by Harborline Portfolio Partners and the underlying validity of the guarantee signed by Ms. Kennedy Wood. The goal is a settlement that avoids a protracted trial." Randall spoke first. He did not look at the mediator. He looked at me. "This is a waste of time," he said. His voice was raspy but sharp. "We offered a settlement, a generous one. My daughter is simply trying to inflict maximum damage because she holds a grudge." I opened my folder. I took out the forensic report. I placed it in the center of the table. "I am not holding a grudge, Randall," I said. "I am holding a forensic analysis from Marrow and Klein. It states, with 99% certainty, That the signature on the guarantee is a simulation. Randall waved a hand dismissively. Experts. You pay them enough, they will say the moon is made of cheese. It is not just the signature, I said. I looked at Evan. It is the timeline. I turned to the mediator. On April 14th, 7 years ago, a hard inquiry was run on my credit report by Crownstead Community Bank. I was living at home. I did not authorize it. That same week, my father told me I was a liability. He told me I had to leave. He used financial language. He talked about covenants and risk profiles. I looked back at Randall. You didn't kick me out because I was pregnant. I said, you kicked me out because the lenders, the syndicate, demanded you clean up your risk profile, and you needed me gone so you could use my name as a silent guarantor without me asking questions. Randall slammed his hand on the table. It was a weak sound, lacking the thunder of his prime. I did what I had to do, he snapped. You think you know business? You answer phones. Kennedy, you collect bills for dentists. You have no idea what it takes to keep a company like Woodridge alive in this economy. I protected this family. Protected? I asked. You stole my identity. I gave you that identity, he shouted. I gave you the name. And you would have ruined it. You were pregnant. You were unmarried. You were a mess. If the investors had seen that, they would have pulled the plug. I saved the company so there would be something left for you to inherit. The room went silent. There it was. The twisted logic of the patriarch. He had cannibalized his child to save the kingdom he intended to leave her. Miles leaned forward. He slid a document across the table toward the mediator. We are prepared to file criminal complaints for fraud, forgery, and identity theft, Miles said. Unless we reach an agreement today. Evan Mercer cleared his throat. He looked nervous. He adjusted his tie. Praxis has an interest here, he said. His voice was smooth. Corporate. We hold the majority of the debt. If Woodridge collapses, we lose our position. We are willing to facilitate a buyout. He looked at me. Kennedy, Praxis is willing to offer $200,000 for the note. We will absorb the guarantee issue. We will mark it as an internal error. You walk away with $250,000, total. I looked at Evan. I saw the fear in his eyes. He wasn't just protecting the bank. He was protecting himself. If this went to trial, his name would be dragged into the mud along with Randall's. I looked at Miles. I expected him to push back. I expected him to fight. Instead, Miles looked at me and gave a nearly imperceptible nod. It is a good offer, Kennedy, Miles said. I froze. I looked at the document Miles had slid to the mediator. I realized it wasn't just a motion. It was a draft settlement agreement. Miles had drafted it with Evan before we walked in. I felt a cold realization wash over me. Miles wasn't just my lawyer. He was a broker. He had set this up. He had used my outrage to drive the price up, and now he was trying to close the deal so he could collect his contingency fee and get back into the good graces of the Briar Glen legal community. He was both an ally and an opportunist. I picked up the settlement draft. I read the first page. Confidentiality clause. The plaintiff agrees to seal all records. I put the paper down. I am not signing this. I said, Kennedy, Miles said, his voice warning, be rational. I am being rational. I said, I turned to Randall. I want to know who signed it. Randall looked away. I want to know who held the pen. I said, the forensic report says it was simulated. That means someone practiced. Who was it? Randall's jaw worked. He said nothing. I looked at Marla. She was weeping silently, her tears dripping onto her silk blouse. Mom? I said. She didn't look up. Tell her, Randall said. His voice was dull. Tell her so we can end this. Marla took a shuddering breath. I witnessed it, she whispered. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. You witnessed it? Randall. He had the stamp, she said, her voice shaking. But the bank needed a witness signature, someone to verify it was you. He told me. He told me it was just a formality. He said if I didn't sign it, the loan would fall through and we would lose the house. She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. I thought it was temporary. Kennedy. I thought he would pay it back in a few months. And Finch and Holloway? I asked. The law firm? They handled the paperwork. Randall muttered. They cleaned the file. They made sure the dates matched. I looked at the three of them. My father, the architect, my mother, the enabler, and the legal system, the lubricant, and you. I said to Marla, you let me leave. You let me get on a bus to Maine with $3,000 in my pocket. You let me think I was being kicked out because I was a disgrace. But really, you were just clearing the room so you could commit a crime. Marla put her face in her hands and sobbed. Why didn't you warn me? I asked. My voice broke. Just once. Why didn't you just tell me? She had no answer. There is no answer for cowardice that satisfies the victim. I stood up. I walked to the window, or where the window would be if this room wasn't a tomb. I had the truth. I had the confession. But I still had the debt. I turned back to the table. I have a counteroffer. I said. Miles looked up, surprised. Kennedy, the Praxis offer is… I don't care about the Praxis offer. I said. I looked at Randall. Here are my terms. 1. We enter a court stipulation today. It voids the guarantee. It states clearly, for the public record, that the signature was unauthorized. I want my credit report scrubbed clean. 2. I keep the note. I become the primary creditor for the old mill property. 3. You agree to an immediate, independent audit of Woodridge Structural, not by your friends, not by the Heritage Club, by a firm I choose. Randall went pale. An audit? That will kill the company. No. I said, it will save it, because Part 4 is this. Once the audit is complete, and the fraud is quantified, I will refinance the debt. The room went silent. Refinance? Evan asked. I will use Harborline to refinance the Praxis loans. I said, I will give you a fair interest rate. I will give you a repayment term that allows the company to survive. I leaned on the table. But in exchange, every penny of profit goes to the subcontractors first, the plumbers, the electricians, the people you stiff to pay the syndicate. They get paid before you take a single dollar in salary. Randall stared at me. You want to run my company? No. I said, I want to discipline it. I want to make sure that the people who actually build things in this town get paid, and the people who shuffle paper get in line. Miles looked at me with a strange expression. It was half annoyance, half awe. And what about Praxis? Evan asked. We have a secured position. I looked at him. You will accept a buyout at face value. I said, no premium, no interest. You will take your principal back and you will walk away. Why would we do that? Evan sneered. Because if you don't. I said, I will file the forensic report and the affidavit from my mother into the public record this afternoon, and then I will send a copy to the state banking regulator, and I will name you, Evan, as a co-conspirator. Evan's face drained of color. He looked at Miles. Miles shrugged, as if to say, she has you. It was a power move. It was the kind of move Dorian Pike had taught me. Leverage isn't about shouting. It is about knowing what the other person is afraid to lose. Randall looked at me. He looked old. He looked defeated. But then, a flicker of the old manipulation sparked in his eyes. He stood up slowly. He walked around the table until he was standing in front of me. He reached out a hand. Kennedy, he said. His voice was soft, trembling. You are tough. You are just like me. I didn't take his hand. I am nothing like you. I said. He smiled. A sad, winning smile. Look, he said, if you do this audit, it is going to be messy. It is going to shame us. He took a step closer. What if we skip the audit? What if you just take over the debt, and we work together? He looked at Marla, then back at me. I will acknowledge you, he said, publicly. We will have a dinner at the club. I will introduce you to everyone. I will tell them. I will tell them I was wrong. I will tell them you are my daughter, and that you are the future of Woodridge. He paused, his eyes searching mine. You can come home. Kennedy, you and the boy. We can be a family again. No more secrets. Just drop the audit. Let the past be the past. I looked at him. It was the offer I had wanted for 7 years. Acceptance, validation. My father, standing in front of the town, telling them I was worthy. I looked at his hand, still extended. It was a beautiful offer, and it was completely transactional. He wasn't offering me love. He was offering me a bribe. He was trading his affection for his safety. He was willing to claim me as his daughter only if I agreed to help him hide his crimes. I thought of Noah. I thought of the way he loved me, without condition, without print, without asking for a signature. That was family. This was just business. I felt the last tether snap, the final thread of hope that I had carried since I was a girl. The hope that he would one day love me just because I was his, dissolved. I looked him in the eye. I don't need a dinner, Randall. I said, I don't need you to introduce me. I don't need you to validate me. I stepped back. I am not doing this to be your daughter. I am doing this to be your creditor. I turned to the mediator. Draw up the stipulation. I said, the audit is non-negotiable. Randall's hand dropped to his side. His face hardened. The mask of the loving father vanished, replaced by the cold sneer of the businessman who had lost the deal. You are making a mistake, he hissed. You are going to find things in those books that you don't want to see. I will take that risk. I said. I looked at Miles. Get it signed. I said. Miles nodded. He pulled out his laptop and began to type. I walked over to Marla. She was still crying, but she was watching me with a look of terrified awe. I am leaving now. I said, Kennedy, I will send you a picture of Noah. I said, but that is all. You chose your side. Mom, you chose the lie. I turned and walked to the door. Kennedy! Evan called out. Wait. I stopped. My hand on the handle. What about us? He asked. What do I tell people? Tell them whatever you want, I said. Tell them you handled the account. Tell them you mitigated the loss. I opened the door. Just don't tell them you know me, because you don't. I walked out of the conference room. I walked down the hallway, my heels clicking on the marble floor. I walked out of the courthouse and into the parking lot. The clouds were breaking. A shaft of sunlight was hitting the hood of my car. I sat in the driver's seat. I took a deep breath. I was shaking. My hands were trembling on the wheel. I let myself feel it for 10 seconds. The grief, the loss, the finality of knowing that I was truly an orphan now. Then, I stopped. I took out my phone. I opened my banking app. I checked the balance of Harborline Portfolio Partners. I opened my email and sent a message to the auditing firm in Columbus. Green light. Proceed immediately. Then I called Tessa. Hey, she answered. Put the pizza in the oven. I said, I am coming home. Did you win? She asked. I looked at the courthouse in the rearview mirror. I saw the brick building where my father was currently signing away his control. I collected. I said. I put the car in gear and drove toward the highway. I did not look back at Briar Glen. I watched the road ahead. It was long, and it was open, and for the first time in my life, I owed nothing to anyone. I was solvent, I was free, and I was a shark who had finally found the open water. Thank you for listening to Kennedy's story. It has been a journey through the dark waters of family betrayal and the cold, hard math of redemption. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Revenge Stories. I would love to hear from you. Leave a comment below telling me where you are listening from and what you would have done in Kennedy's shoes. Would you have taken the family offer, or would you have demanded the audit? Until next time, keep your ledgers clean and your boundaries strong.